welcome to Anything But Ordinary with Spooky and Raven. Tonight, our topic is Doppelgangers and Spirit Doubles. I am your host, Spooky, and here's your other host, Raven.
Hey, was just how are you doing? Trying to set this thing up and it hung up on me there for a second.
I know my window isn't acting right on the player, so
yeah, I heard it. They probably heard you typing when you were trying to fix your stuff.
They probably did.
You forgot to mute.
I was trying to send a message to you and I forgot to mute. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So, it's been really hot here. Just kind of driving me nuts a little bit and headaches, but...
Oh, I know that feeling. It's been hot and humid here, and I hate sweating. I hate anything that makes me sweat. I just hate it.
Well, tonight, we're going to talk about doppelgangers and spirit doubles and kind of like the different theories and whatnot that everybody kind of has of what exactly they are and kind of like what they've been talked about through history and stuff. And it was kind of inspired by the last couple of guests that we had on our last show, because they had some experiences that they had mentioned during the show, and it kind of got us thinking about doppelgangers and the possibility of such things occurring.
Doppelgangers excuse me, which basically you probably all know, but for those who don't, it's the German word that literally means double walker. It's been said that a doppelganger is the twin of a living person. Now, the folklore of doppelgangers has been around for literally thousands of years, if not longer, and it's been practically throughout all of human history.
Well, right, doppelwalker is the same thing as your twin. You know what I mean? And I think that's what you're saying. And yeah, and for the most part, I mean, we're all really kind of accustomed to that word. But, it, like we know, it's from our research and stuff, it actually there's so many different titles for this type of phenomenon that's happening throughout the whole world, throughout history. But this is the one, when you say doppelganger, everybody automatically knows, oh, yeah, I kind of know what you're talking about and stuff.
Yeah.
And... I just, sorry, I got a headache. But after, kind of researching a little bit online and stuff, and when I was kind of looking around, it seems to be that, the different explanations on what they really are, it's kind of like some people are saying they're real living humans,
Or spirits or demonic.
That's true. There's some who said they're like dimensional beings, or there's some where I was reading where they were actually saying they're like these type of clones. There's like this, like IE clones is what a lot of people like conspiracists are talking about, that they're cloning these people. It's like aliens and human mixed race, and they're like these type of IE clones and stuff. And there's this whole website kind of dedicated to that by jamescastable.com or whatever, so you can read all the way up on his theory of why people are seeing all these many versions of themselves scattered throughout the United States or world, is because it's really, these different IE clones of ourselves. I've read things like that.
I can't see how they would be clones, because for them to be, for a doppelganger to actually be a clone, wouldn't they, the scientist or whoever are doing that, wouldn't they need a sample of our DNA? Where would they get it?
Oh, no, I know. We're not, the things that we're going to throw out tonight for you guys to know, it's like we're trying to gather as much as it's out there and give a wide variety of all the different experiences that people have had and the different theories and the things that they're kind of bantering on, and then we'll give kind of a little bit of what we may think as well, but we're going to kind of like leave it up to them, right, like we always normally do. But the thing is if we go with what a few of these conspiratists are believing, because I'm not saying every double that somebody sees of themselves is paranormal, or is it a real person, or maybe it's a clone, but these people think it's because it's like an alien / government thing. So maybe all these aliens have been abducting people. This is their stuff. I'm not saying it's ours. It's just kind of out there that maybe they've abducted them. That's how they got their DNA. You know what I mean?
Right. But It's like she said, we're not saying
Well, we're not saying, if we know that if they are or if they do exist one way or the other. I do believe that
right.
many, many people have had these experiences, and I'm not going to deny them of that experience because there's just too many of it that's been occurring.
Well,
And we know
right.
people personally who's had these experiences.
Exactly. Yes, we do. And we're just going to share what we ourselves stumbled upon when it came to spirit doubles and doppelgangers.
Right.
I can barely get that word out.
You're
And
fired.
we're going to leave it up to the listeners to decide for themselves.
Exactly. And that's what we like to do. We try to bring out everything we can and research stuff even we didn't really know about, and then just kind of have an open forum. And then we always do enjoy when people contact us over after the shows and stuff and leave us messages and let us know the things that they've experienced. Because before the show actually aired, because we were supposed to have it last week, but because of illness and I had massive headaches and stuff, we postponed it till this week. And so during that time, I've actually met a couple of people online who had shared their experiences with me, and some of them were in solid form that they were sharing about, and then others ones were family members or other people saw them somewhere where they weren't. You know what I mean? And some people had even mentioned that the things that they saw were they saw themselves, but it was in a spirit form. And to me that'd be a little trippy, but because wasn't it one of the twins that we had on the last show when we were on, I can't remember which one it was, but I know that they had mentioned to have that occurrences too about meeting their
Well,
doubles and stuff, but I know that they're
right.
not the only ones to have these strange occurrences of meeting or seeing double versions of themselves or loved ones in spirit. But there was this time, because I actually had this happen to me too. Okay, I had a couple of people mention to me that they had saw me somewhere or somebody had mistaken me for somebody else. But I had friends that were living in another state than where I was, and they said that they went into this restaurant and they saw me working there, and I was this waitress, and they said that this
Wow.
person looked like me to a T. I was except for I think her hair was a different color, just a slightly darker than mine.
Yeah.
And they kind of accused me of. I was also kind of another time. Well, because my friend called right away, and I said, "Hey, if you go back to that restaurant, make sure you take a picture." Because I'm there's no way that person looked like me. I'm maybe they just had similar hair, and you just thought. And they're no, everything about them was just like you, even the way that she talked and presented herself when she was working and stuff. But there was another time when I was younger. I was actually traveling with my aunt and uncle. We were heading up somewhere to meet up with I don't know where we were going actually, but we stopped at this fast food place, and while we were eating, I was actually approached by someone who worked there, and they asked me if I was so and so, and of course I said no, and I was told that I was this person that they were asking who I was, and they were saying that somebody who worked in the back restaurant, where the cooking stuff is in the fast food part,
Right.
that they had sent them up and said that I was actually this person and I was messing around with their boyfriend. And I
Oh
know.
my.
And I told them, I'm I don't even live in this town, nor I don't even know who this dude is or who you people are. So I'm not messing around with anybody, and I don't even know what you're talking about, and you totally have the wrong person. And they were so convinced that I was this person, and they were telling me that person back there was really PO'd, and that they wanted to kick my butt kind of thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not this person, you have me wrong. And even my aunt and my uncle said, you have the wrong person, and that's the first time I've ever stopped there or even anything, you know what I mean? So they kind of just walked away, but they didn't believe me at all. And I was just whatever. So it kind of makes you wonder, is there someone else out there that looks really vaguely similar to us in almost every physical way? Just the fact that I had that happen to me a couple of times.
That's about your luck too. Visit a restaurant for the first time and be accused of something you had nothing to do with.
I know. I'm lucky I didn't get beat up.
Yeah, really. Well, people can argue that identical twins are doppelgangers of each other, and technically they would be right in that sense. But the doppelgangers that we are referring to are of the paranormal kind.
Yeah.
Is it really folklore? Do we really have an exact duplicate of ourselves out there somewhere?
Mm-hmm.
Even as a child, some of us, have heard someone say everyone has a twin somewhere out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Can this really be true? I have read online many people sharing their own encounters or experiences of seeing a double and even sharing photos of someone they found that looks like them.
Oh, I know. There's like, I know probably everybody who's listening tonight that's in the chat room and not in the chat room, as well as people who probably tune in later on our podcast. But I mean, we've seen that stuff going around with all the famous people that look like this photo of someone else who lived in the past. And I mean, I'm not going to show all those photos because you can Google all them, but you've seen all those different famous people that are like, oh, this guy looks like this guy from the Civil War time. John Travolta looks like this person. Or
the guy that looked like Nicolas Cage.
Yeah. And there are some who believe that they were actually, they're saying that in the more conspiracy theories, that these people who showed, that they're actually have been reincarnated. That's why it's their photo. Or they're like time traveling. And that's why we see them in the photo from then and now. But there's just all these different theories to why these people are having these, because there's so many different versions of a doppel that we've been reading out. So we're just going to throw it all out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, from what I was reading, when it comes to the topic about doppels, it would seem that many do believe that they are real and not just folklore or myth.
Well,
I mean, there are people out there that actually believe that doppelgangers are real.
Well, I kind of think that there's what, 7 to 8 billion people on this planet, right?
Right.
Roughly around that amount.
Roughly.
Yeah. But if you kind of actually think about it, I think it would be weirder if there was no two people who actually had some vaguely similarities in their appearance. I mean, the human race, like, okay, we each have like our own unique genetic code, which causes to look a bit different from one another, except for when it kind of comes to identical twins. But even then, I mean, even twins, they only have like this very slight difference about them physically. And I'm not talking like, oh, they have dyed hair, or one's got long hair, one's short hair, one's tanned or more weathered or whatever. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about like they'll have like this very slight difference, but even then they're not like 100% because we all have like kind of like our own unique genetic code. But I mean, is there this possibility of like a complete stranger who could have like similarities to us? I mean, if you kind of think about it, the two people at some point in time could come close to having like the same genetic DNA codes just because of both of them coming from the same lineage. And sorry, somebody opened my door and threw me off. I apologize, guys. But my thought was like it's possible where people could have pretty much close similar physical features, but not 100%, because we may share similar DNA codes because of the same lineage family line that may have come down at some point, or just heritage type of thing. So we may bear, like similar physical features, where one could say that they were our twin or our doppel. And I can see that happening because if everybody like had a certain Irish descent and British descent or whatever, and you mix it together, and at some point these people are going to share almost the similar coding. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, we all have unique genetic makeup and DNA, but it has been said by some on the net that humans are 99.9% identical in DNA, but it's that 0.1% that gives us our own unique appearance.
Right.
So let's say we did come from two people, Adam and Eve as an example.
Right, because some people believe that. Right.
Yeah. There is the probability that you would find others on this planet that could be considered your doppel because of the DNA lineage.
Right, that same genetic DNA code, just because of certain, because we have similar heritage backgrounds, especially back in the day. If you think about it, I just a quick thought because it's popping in my head, but if you think about it, way back in the day, I could kind of see it more happening because a lot of people still stayed in the same area. So as your family was branching out and stuff throughout years, it would seem plausible for you to run into somebody that would vaguely have a lot more similarities physically because of that. Whereas nowadays, you know, it's really kind of spread out more and stuff, so it's probably not as much in that aspect of, that could be one reason why. But even if you find someone who's like darn near your double in every way, they'll never have the exact same fingerprint pattern as you, because everybody
Right.
has their own unique fingerprint. I mean, even identical twins. I mean, just as much as we have our own unique fingerprints, we each have our own souls. I mean, no two souls are 100% alike either. So even if you're like 100% practically the same in every physical manner and a feature, your personality is going to be varied just as much as your fingerprints are going to be different. I mean, I have an example about doppel experiences through history and fingerprints story that saved this guy from a crime that he didn't commit, and I'm going to kind of tell that a little bit later on. But
Okay.
there is always that chance that there is a double of you out there. And certainly when it comes to, like you were saying, the lineage of the DNA makeup could have been passed down so much, and at one point there's that other couple people out there that might just have the same, almost similar to amount, you know what I mean? So maybe that's why some people are seeing other people like us out there. Just a
Well,
thought.
I kind of shudder at the thought of another me out there.
I do too, but what can you do?
Oh, I don't think the world could take it. In folklore, a doppelganger is a look-alike or exact double of a living person. And in most cultures, they are perceived as a harbinger of bad luck or an omen of death,
Right.
or portrayed as your evil twin.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are legends and stories of them in literally every culture in the world. And all these cultures have their own names for these twins. But the German word doppelganger seems to be the most used. But it's like you said before, you know, when someone says doppelganger, they immediately know what you're talking about.
Well, right. I mean, I agree, because I've heard it growing up through, just like you guys did, through movies and stories. But I myself, I've never, to my knowledge, have ever encountered one. But there's people who I know who say I look like somebody else. But
Yeah.
I mean, who knows if there's a person, you know what? If you're out on the street, who knows if the person standing next to you or walking beside you on the sidewalk or in the car next to you in traffic isn't someone's doppel? We have no idea. There's some who believe that our soul splits off in many layers to experience slightly different variations of life experiences when we die, and then they die, and that's why some have this like deja vu experience. And although we have like flashback of doing something before we never did it, or who knows. I mean, it's just all of this is just might be made up in someone else's head. I don't know. It's just thought, because there's that multi-layer life experience. What they're talking about, parallel levels. You know what I mean? Parallel worlds and stuff.
Right.
I lost my thought. Got distracted by chat. I'm sorry.
Well, actually, there is a psychiatric term for people who experience this so-called phenomenon.
Well, that's why I was saying it might be
Um,
made up in someone's head, because they have that thing too. But I don't think everybody's
right. Well, since they don't believe this is possible, but
the shrinks.
the psychiatric, yeah, the psychiatrists,
Psychologists.
they just don't, they're scientists, they don't believe in nothing. But the psychiatric term is heotoscopy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this term is used in psychiatry and neurology for the reduplication or hallucination of seeing one's own body at a distance. It is considered a symptom of schizophrenia and epilepsy. And it's also considered a possible explanation. I can't seem to talk tonight. I apologize. Explanation to the doppelganger phenomenon.
So, according to these people's theories, they're saying everyone who sees or encounters a doppelganger is either schizophrenic or they're constantly having epileptic seizures. I mean,
Yeah.
even if it's not even their own double. Okay, so I see somebody that looks like you or Penny or whoever, so then I must be schizophrenic.
Yeah,
So
that's exactly what they're saying.
It doesn't. There's a lot of people.
Or epileptic.
Sorry, or maybe I'm both. So that's why.
I don't know about you.
That doesn't. That's just a quick term to try to brush off, like, okay, this can't happen, because that doesn't make sense. Not that.
No, it doesn't.
There could be a one small percentage where, and I don't think schizophrenia is you hallucinate.
Schizophrenia is not, as far as I know, is not hallucinations. It's voices in your. No, schizophrenia is different personalities. But I don't know about you, but have you ever seen anyone in an epileptic seizure?
I have,
and I have talked to people about their seizures, and they don't see anything.
Well, because their body's like in a. I can't show you. I'm like trying to show you my body's shaking, but no. But yeah, they're trapped.
Body's in a convulsion.
Yeah, they're trapped in their body for a moment. They're not seeing anything, let alone a guy walking down the street, but like, hey, is that Richard? They're too busy in a seizure. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I'm not making fun of anybody. I'm not either. I just don't buy that everybody who has experienced this phenomenon, because there's a plethora of people who have this. Like I said, if you get everybody in one room and everybody told their truths of what they've experienced, it would change the reality of everybody. But I don't think, maybe there might be the 1 or 2% out there where they do have some type of health issue or something that may cause them to experience things that are not happening. But to say everybody across the whole board, it's because they're schizophrenic or have epileptic seizures, that's the only reason why they have this doppelganger phenomenon. I don't buy that theory. It's out there, but I don't buy that as the reasoning of that's how we can pass it off,
I don't buy the theory either, but okay.
Well, but we said we were going to present everything out there. I understand.
Right. But I don't buy the theory either, but schizophrenic, I can maybe kind of see that, because that is...
Well, if they got you on all these different medications, and medications make you hallucinate and everything else, but not everybody in the freaking world has a health issue or on medication, and not everybody's seeing these things, but they're trying to say, like, all these people, because there's different versions of it. Someone's seeing them in solid form, other people are seeing them through spirit form. So there's different versions of these type of things. And who knows, there's a thought that came up that we were bantering about this, when it comes to spirit doubles and stuff, because from what we were looking at, it can be traced back for thousands of years in many ancient cultures, and just alone in their stories, the myths, the history, their art, you know what I'm saying, all that stuff, right? All the way up to nowadays. So where people are seeing what the spirit is, because it's not the physical one, because there's people who see physical ones where you could touch them and the real clothing and everything, and there's the other one, there's the spirit double. It's basically the copy of that person, and some say, it may be demonic in the sense like it's this trickster that goes around and it's stalking and choosing its prey at random to cause, like you were saying, what the term for doppelganger is, the mischief, or some of the terms that they have, or something more. And I had a thought before that too when I started saying it, but I forgot it. So there's like so much going in my head, you know what I mean? So, but the thing was, like, all these people are having the experience and seeing all this stuff, you know what I mean? And I don't buy it that everybody has a mental issue, you know what I mean? So
I lost my thought.
Sorry.
Well, generally they're considered as omens of bad luck or impending death.
Right.
If a doppelganger is seen by one's family or friends, then it means that bad luck or illness is going to befall that person. While encountering your own doppelganger, that is an omen considered an omen of your own death. And a good example of that is Catherine the Great.
Well, yeah.
After the murder of her husband, Peter III, in 1762, Catherine the Great, Catherine proclaimed herself Empress of Russia. Now, in turn, she seized the land and the serfs of the church and went to war with Turkey. Many historians consider her to be nothing more than an evil tyrant, and I've read about her and I agree with them. But anyway, I think it was 1796, Catherine saw her double sitting on the royal throne. Mm-hmm. So she ordered it shot, but it really had no effect on the doppelganger. All it did was just shoot up the royal throne. But shortly after this, though, after this incident, Catherine died of natural causes.
Well, right. So that goes with the one version of the doppelganger is when you see yourself, whatever you die, or that's what they're saying and stuff.
Right.
But there's, like you were saying, we were reading online and stuff. I mean, there's several documented experiences of doppelgangers by individuals who claim to have encountered their, I guess their Bayful double. That, and it can be found online. I mean, you got the case of Abraham Lincoln. He's a very popular one about as far as seeing a doppelganger.
Oh yeah. In 1895, I think, in his book Washington in Lincoln's Time, this author Noah Brooks tells of an experience that Lincoln had that was actually little known. Only a select few even knew this happened.
Mm-hmm.
But in 1860, it was on the evening of his election. He hadn't taken office yet. He had just been elected.
Right.
Lincoln arrived home and he looked into this bureau mirror. I guess he was emptying his pockets like guys do, empty pockets, throw it on the dresser. But anyway, he saw his reflection in double. Now, Lincoln said that he said that his face had two separate and distinct images, and although the images were identical, one was about 5 shades paler than the other. And he shrugged it off as the excitement of just being elected president. But it showed up again in like a couple weeks and in the same mirror. So he told his wife about it, and she immediately began to worry because she believed that it was a sign that Lincoln would serve his first term and be elected to a second term, but he wouldn't live to serve the second term.
Wasn't?
And
oh, sorry, go ahead.
And of course, we all know that shortly after his reelection, he was assassinated.
Right. Well, when you're saying that he was standing next to him, he was like looking in the mirror, but beside him would be like his twin, but it was in spirit form staring into the mirror too. It wasn't like, oh, I look in the mirror and I see myself. He saw like an extra, there was like physically something else next to him looking in as well.
Right.
But he only saw it in the mirror, not physically.
He felt it, but he couldn't see it. If he turned his head and looked, he couldn't see it, but he could feel something there. But when he looked in the mirror, he could see it.
Wasn't Mary Todd Lincoln and that other guy, they were both, what was it? That private secretary, John Hay, wasn't that him and Mary Todd Lincoln? They both confirmed this story as well to happening and knowing about it.
But Mary Todd Lincoln, though, was a believer in the supernatural and the spirit world.
Oh, yeah.
But how she came to this conclusion and interpretation from a double image, I have no idea.
Well, think about it. Okay, because paranormal and the spiritual stuff wasn't, because we did a show on spiritualism, and didn't it really pick up in the 1800s? Wasn't that what it was and stuff? And just like we know the term doppelganger and the stories that's been passed down through centuries, so obviously she's read stuff or heard something, or she'd had ancestors who...
She held seances in the White House.
Right, and several of them.
Yeah,
and
it wasn't just like one.
It was like
several.
Parties, she'd have her friends come over, and then they would, ring the dead,
Yeah.
But so to me, I'm not shocked that she automatically kind of had an idea of what it meant, and if she seemed to, it maybe her herself, she may have had she ran more of the spiritual side and less in the carnal side, so maybe she kind of could understand the impending doom of what it meant.
Well, it kind of makes me wonder if maybe she had some psychic gift or something, or she was just able to interpret things. I don't know.
Right, yeah, Noreen said, the Fox Sisters was in the 1800s. Yeah, and that's what we did the show on. Thanks, Noreen. But so that's around that time period, and it was really taking off all around there, remember?
Yes, it was.
And it was like almost in every household. And then it died down a little bit and it comes right back up again. But so it makes sense to me why she could kind of interpret and understand him seeing his doppel and stuff. But I just find that was really fascinating that he had that experience, and then not long after, he ends up getting shot.
Well, he even, in a book that he wrote, or or he may have co-wrote. I forget which. It was some sort of biography. It was mentioned in that book, but it was Noah Brooks that really, that
Put
really
it
went
out
into
there.
some sort of depth.
Mm-hmm.
But even in ancient Egyptian mythology, these spirit doubles were known as a Ka, Ka,
Yep.
and were believed to have the same thoughts and feelings as the living person they looked like.
Well, see, the Ka, the Ka, from what kind of from what I'm understanding and known and reading about throughout time periods, not just now when we were studying for the show, but I mean, it kind of represents several things. I mean, it kind of represents the life power of each person, which is the spiritual double that is a part of each of us. And this thought that every human being had a double that was born with each person, which kind of co-determined like the outcome of the person's fate, as well as it having a similar type of disposition that would influence that one person's emotional life as well. Or so it's kind of been said when it comes to the Egyptian mythology and stuff. But it's also kind of been said from when I was reading the Ka, the Ka, it needed like this physical body to continue on living in a sense. And if there was like no body, there was no Ka. So that was one of the reasons, from what I was reading, throughout time, not just recently, that the Egyptians mummified the bodies was because of the Ka. And from the way that they talk about it and stuff, to me, the Ka, the life force and stuff, to me is the same kind of word of what people are saying, the soul. That's our life force.
Yeah.
And then typically, the doppelganger, it's not typical from what I'm related to of being told when growing up of what the doppelganger was.
Right.
Where the Ka energy is more, it sounds like the way that they're explaining it, you see your double, it's your spirit, it's your soul.
Right.
So your soul,
Well, that's
when
what
you
I got
leave your
from it,
body, you still look like that body. You know what I mean? It still holds that form, but you're in your spirit sense. And the Ka, from what and I know it's a lot in the Egyptian mythology and stuff, but that's what it's more like, Sorry.
Well, in Norse folklore, the entities are known as vardoger or vardog. I don't know, Vardoger. Okay,
That's good enough. You
and
try.
but these beings would precede their living counterparts and take their place at activities and perform their actions in advance before the actual living person arrived. And so this folklore tells us that not all doppelgangers are sinister entities.
Right, when it comes to the Norse folklore, and there's a couple other folklores that are similar to the
Right.
Norse's, but if you kind of read about the vardoger, or however you quite say it, we apologize if we're saying it kind of wrong, but from what you're saying to me is that this spirit has like the same likeness to the living person, and according to the Norse folklore, it'll show up in places before that living person has arrived, and
Right.
the people who are there are seeing and experiencing this double. But because
Exactly.
they have it in the Finnish folklore too, and it's just got a different name, and I think they kind of got similar things too in other different cultures, in their lore and their myths as well, about this thing where they see your double and it goes ahead of you and you're still alive. You know what I mean? But then it
Yeah.
disappears. But maybe in some cases it's almost, if you're kind of going with the Norse folklore and the Finnish folklore and stuff with the Vardago, sorry if I said it wrong, but in that aspect it almost sounds like maybe in these cases it's almost like an astral projection kind of thing.
I
Well, because
I would have to agree with that because I don't know if the person is doing it on purpose or if they're unknowingly projecting themselves.
Well, like that's what I'm saying, because maybe it's possible for one person to project oneself consciously and unconsciously, because we're all if everything's made up of energy and we're made up of energy, okay, here's an example. I read somewhere online, and I'll post this link on YouTube, on our YouTube description later on, so you guys can read what I was kind of reading, where I got this from. But I guess there's like this businessman, okay? He was from the States, and he was going to travel abroad for his first time. And when he arrived to I can't remember what it was. We'll just say Norway, okay? When
Okay.
he arrived over to Norway, everywhere he was going, he was greeted by his name. Like, everybody knew his name, and they talked to him like they'd already known him, and they, shook him, and they were happy to see him, and, like they were old-time friends. And from what I read on this site, it was said that he was planning his trip for like months.
Yeah.
So what he did was he actually sent his astral double abroad, but had no conscious awareness that he had did so. And that's where you get that vardoger, arrival of his spirit double venture there before his physical self actually ever went, because he'd never been overseas before, ever. Well, he self-projected himself there unconsciously, not knowing about it, and he greeted it and walked around and did things there before he even made it there. And that's why all these people knew of him and knew about him and knew his name and everything about him. And that's why they knew him, because it had all his physical features of himself,
Right.
But I don't know. There's so much to this stuff, you know what I mean? So it's more just like the projection of someone in his actions. I mean, do you recall the twins talking that one time on the last show about seeing the devil of themselves? But it was like in spirit form. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Now, I can't remember which girl it was, but it was one of the girls, and I can't recall which it was, but I think she was like sitting down in the living room or something like that, and she said she saw herself in spirit form walking down the hallway or something like that, but yet she was still awake seeing herself. So, I mean, could she have been subconsciously astral projecting her future actions, or was it something else she saw, like a spirit double, which is, like I kind of said before, maybe like the demon or the trickster that takes on the form of you? I mean, I don't know. That's just kind of like something that popped in my head when we were talking about this earlier before we did the show this week.
But didn't they also mention that one of them actually has done astral projection unknowingly, and the other one had actually seen them walking around the house while their body was sleeping?
Right, yeah. I think they were, like, we both asked. Yeah, because one was like, they're going to make a sandwich and was like, hey, you want a sandwich? The other one's like, leave me alone, I'm sleeping. And then the next thing you know, she sees her sister in spirit form leaving the bedroom, go into the kitchen, and she's like, hey, but, I think we both asked them, if I recall right, if she ever tried to meditate to see if she could control her walkabouts in astral form. Because I think that she had mentioned it happening a few different times. But she never was aware of it, but her sister saw her do it.
Right. I think that we did ask her about that, and I think that we did discuss it. I can't remember if we discussed it on the show or not, but I remember discussing it with her while we were Skyping.
I don't know, I thought it was on the show too.
Because
at some point
she said something about she meditated.
Or no, she never
or before she slept, something like that.
I don't know. But the point was that so the thing is, these people, like, okay, let's say you're told, because I think one of them else said they were sitting in a movie theater totally pumped about doing a paranormal investigation,
Yeah.
And she's kept thinking about, like, oh, I really want to do this, and then she kept getting these phone calls asking her, hey, I saw you on such and such street and stuff. So maybe even that's the same example as the vardoger, where somebody subconsciously or unconsciously self-projected their self, and people are seeing these things. Just like that guy who went to Norway before he even went there, and everybody knew him before he physically got there. He went there spiritually in his ka form, you know what I'm saying?
Can you astral project and not know it or even remember it?
I think a lot of people, I think that's why people have that deja vu experience as well, because you go somewhere and be like, I felt like I've been here before. So there's some people who say, well, I've met actually people who know how to do this, because and I've met people who just did it randomly and didn't know how to control it, but it happens all the time, right before they fall asleep. All of a sudden they're outside their body, and they're still, they can go into any room or any place, look at somebody, know what you're doing, what you're reading and stuff, come up out of their body, go and say, you just did this. And they're like, how the heck do you know? So it does happen. And, does it happen to a lot of people unconsciously? I bet it does. Does it happen to a lot of people who know how to control it? I don't know the numbers of that. I know I don't know how to do it consciously. I'm sure if I probably focused and worked on it, I'm sure it's a possibility. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
you know my stance in it. I believe that we're spirits having a human experience. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
don't think that we're tied down to anything. I think we tie ourselves down to it because of our own fears and thoughts. But I know that we're with this body because we're attached to it. But once the body dies, we don't die. I don't know where we go officially 100%. I can say, oh, this is where you're going. I don't know that. But I know that we do not die just because I've had a near-death experience. You know what I mean? So
Right.
we're getting all over the place. But when it comes to the
Yeah, we
doppelganger,
are.
but when it comes to the doppelganger, there is so many different versions of it that's out there. You know what I mean? Throughout the history and through what people are experiencing. So maybe it's not just one thing, but that word seems to fit a variety of people seeing a double version of themselves. One in astral projection form, two, someone seeing a spirit or a trickster mimicking somebody they know or themselves. What was the other one? Another one, there's a physical form. And we had a friend talk to us the other night about her seeing her husband doppelganger, and it wasn't him. Like, he'd be upstairs in the shower, and she was downstairs, and there he would be in the kitchen going to get the phone or something, and it wasn't him. I mean, she had said she had seen it twice, you know, and he was physical, where you could touch him, you know what I mean? So I don't
Right.
know what could take the form of it, something to make it that solid. That's creepier, you know, for it to show up solid and
Yeah,
then
it
just
is.
disappear.
I've never really encountered a doppelganger to my knowledge.
Maybe you will
And to be
tonight.
honest with you, I'm not even real sure I believe in them.
Really? How could you not?
Really.
From the different.
I've never encountered them.
Well, you've encountered Bigfoot.
Yeah, but that's not a doppelganger.
But a doppelganger could be like a spirit, and you've had spirits, right? So maybe they take on the form to trick people in that sense.
No, they could. I know demons do, but that's an entirely different show.
Well, in a sense, but all of this kind of ties in together in a way. All of this, just even like, I don't know. There's so much, like I said, when it comes to the world and all the things that we're not even fully aware of yet. Just because we're limited to, just because of our own personal experiences, doesn't mean that it doesn't exist or
I
happens.
will. Well, that's true, and I do agree with that. And I would probably, if I ever encounter one, then I would probably believe in it. But I just, if I haven't encountered one, then as far as I'm concerned, it may exist, it may not exist. I don't know if it does, and not sure if I believe if it does or not.
Well, I mean, I've never encountered some of the things that other people have experienced, but I totally
Right.
believe them when they tell me, just because of the weird experiences that I've encountered.
Well, yeah, sometimes if a person encounters something and they're sitting and talking to you, you can pretty well tell that these people, uh, that happened to them, or they honestly believe it happened to them. I mean, sometimes you can tell. Well, a lot of times you can tell. But I have just never encountered
Well, you yourself have never
a
seen
doppelganger.
somebody who looked like somebody, or you've never seen somebody who looks just like yourself yet, you know,
Right.
and that's okay. But like I said, there's so many things that we've kind of thrown out just so far, but we still have more to talk about. But just like, because of there's, people could have really close genetic DNA lineage and family heritage and stuff like that, where you could possibly have somebody else who has vaguely similar physical traits to you, but they will never be like 100% like you, because you have different spirits, you're different personalities. So you can have that aspect. And then there's aspects of tricksters and things taking on the forms of loved ones and stuff. And then you have the Egyptian mythology of what we just mentioned, but to me, it sounds like they're talking about your soul, your life force, which makes this body work. You know what I mean? So,
Hmm.
but isn't the Native Americans, I mean, don't they have like myths or beliefs when it comes to like spirit twins too?
Well, I think they do. I read online that the Hopi legend refers to them as like the child of the sun and the child of the water, because the Hopi believed in, oh, what's the word I want? Duality of the upper world and the underworld. And what this actually means is that whatever is happening here in the upper world, the opposite is happening in the underworld. So they do believe in this. This is just the Hopi. I don't know what others, I mean, I
All because there's like a little every yeah they each have a little variation,
well, I'm
just
sure they
like
do.
every just like the Irish have their thing, the Germans have their thing, the
Right.
la 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 la, and the same with Native Americans. They each have a slight difference of their beliefs. You know what I mean?
Right.
But from what you're kind of saying as far as the Hopi legend goes, a little bit of what you're saying about the duality of the upper world and the underworld, to me, that almost sounds like parallel lives.
Right.
And if we, and from kind of what I'm thinking, and I may be wrong, we just throw things out because me and you never say what we say is gospel, drink the Kool-Aid. We don't do that. We
Right.
just like to banter about a lot of stuff. And just because we talk about it doesn't mean we subscribe to everything we're saying. It's just, we just think and toss things out there and we're always constantly evolving, and learning, But if you, I guess in this way of this parallel life stuff, if it's kind of like we choose between, if you think about, okay, every day we choose between our daily actions and thoughts, right? And then
Right.
once we choose a certain action, then the other possibility of that future dies off, or does that alternative decision, the possibility of that action playing out, let's say in another parallel world, and is experienced and carried out by another part of us. That's where it comes in. We're talking about where we have the split souls, you know what I mean? The parallel lives. And there's some who believe in the mini world theory, and maybe our doppel is just that, like a splinter of our, whole self that coexists in a parallel world. So we chose one action here, whereas the other, you have those books where you read and then it says pick A, B, or C, and then
Right.
you can read the book like 3 or 4 times and pick a different path and get a different story ending. It's just
Right.
like life, and that's what I'm saying about the parallel lives. If we do one thing here, maybe the other life of yourself chooses that other action and plays it out. And maybe why, let's say you really wanted to go to Europe, but then something came up and you chose a different path. So then you didn't get to go, but the other half of you did get to go. And then that's why you'll see something on TV or read something and felt like, oh my gosh, I've done this before. Or I know I've been here. Why do I know all this about this place? Maybe in this other parallel world, your other half played out that path. You know what I mean? This is just things that people talk about, and that's what they're talking. And at some point between the, I don't know, these levels may meet, the parallel levels might meet sometime, and then they break over into our reality, and that's why people may see doubles or triples of us. This is the things that people are talking about. You know what I mean?
Well, wasn't parallel speaking of parallel worlds,
Right.
wasn't that something that many theories were discussed in the 50s through quantum mechanics or something like that? That basically, as soon as you make one choice here, the other choice is then played out in the other reality. So both actions coexist in the universe. Except, of course, this is um, all scientific theory, nothing factual, but it runs on the more spiritual sense.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess you had a question there, but you kind of popped ahead of me before I could answer what you were saying. But yeah, kind of like what these people are talking about, and this is what they're talking about. That comes with the quantum mechanics and stuff like that, and they don't really have any factual proof to it, but they're constantly discussing these things and everything else. And there's a lot of people who believe in that theory, and they believe in some sense at one point, just like dimensional beings cross over, that these parallel worlds we may cross sometime, it might get crossed, and then you see splinters or images of ourselves briefly, and then they move on. But, there's those who believe that the soul experiences these different actions in the parallel lives, and even though the actions are kind of like done independently of each other, we're still connected internally with that other self. That's what they're saying. And all of our different little splinters are, we all come back into one thing. This is what they're saying and they're believing. But, the you know what? That's like a whole other topic in itself. You know what I'm talking about? And we'll probably touch more on that in like a different night or whatever. But yes, this could be explained to theory of the doppelganger experiences. But in the spirit double, I don't think that they are seen as solid physical forms in that sense. Do you see what I'm saying? Because there's just so many different things of this that people are explaining, and they all call it a doppel. And there's so many different things that they're saying. So we don't really know, but there's so much out there, and these are the things that people are saying or talking about. This is what this is. This is what this is. This is what this is. So.
Well, not all of these stories, though, are just myths, legends, or folklores. I mean, or stories told in the dark or around campfires to scare us. There have been real life documented cases throughout history.
You want to take a quick break, though, first? And then, because we're almost like in the hour, into the next hour.
Okay.
So if just give everybody a break to go get something to drink and stretch or whatever.
Sure.
To process, because we're kind of like throwing all this stuff out them. In so many different angles, so they're probably just like, whoa, you know what I mean? So I need to get water too before I start coughing. So we're gonna just take like a quick 3-minute break, and then we're gonna return and tell like real documented stories throughout history that you guys can read in books and everything else that of these people having these experiences and stuff. And for those of you who are listening over at a Ustream site, if you want, you can scroll down and find the link to our website, and you can join in with the chatters, because they're actually having really good conversations in there with their own stuff, so it's kind of hard to not get pulled into theirs. But we'll be back in 3 minutes, so thank you for tuning in. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Anything But Ordinary with Spooky and Raven. I'm your host, Raven. Hopefully, Spooky's back with us too.
Yes, I am.
I'm sorry, I needed to get water. My throat was like drying up because we were trying to cover all the different theories before we went into the actual stories of real, documented doppelganger experiences and stuff. And I guess it's saying that sometimes when people click on the player, it takes them back over to our Ustream site.
It does me. I can't get it to play on the chat on the site.
I don't know. Sometimes stupid things act weird on the internet, and I apologize for those of you who got frustrated over that. We'll look into it later on and make sure it's, not just the website technicality issue, or maybe it's just Ustream or whatever. But then again, we might be moving over to YouTube. Who knows? We're looking at different avenues as well. So I apologize for those who may have had that issue.
Yeah, we are seriously considering going to YouTube and broadcast from there.
Well, I don't know. We might try it out because
We haven't decided.
there's
We are
cons
just
to it and there's
considering
pros.
it.
There's cons to it and there's pros to it at the same
Right.
time. You know what I mean? But we apologize to anybody who may have had that issue tonight. We apologize. But so we kind of gave the different theories of what people are tossing out there.
Right.
From astral projection to demonic to tricksters to a physical person that may have similar DNA, heritage type lineage code at some point, so they may vaguely have similarities to you.
Yep.
And then what else did we throw out there? I can't remember. Oh, parallel worlds, parallel lives,
universes, yeah.
parallel lives, and at some point it might crossover. There's people who say that that might be why somebody sees a doppel of you. And now, I think what we're going to do now is just go in and talk about the real documented experiences throughout history, kind of up to
Right.
date.
Well, it's like I said right before we went on break that not all of these stories are myths or legends or stories told in the dark around the campfires. There have been real life documented cases throughout history.
Mm-hmm.
John Donne, Donne. He was a 16th century English poet. Now, while in Paris, he had a visit from a doppelganger, but what makes his story a bit different is the doppelganger was not his, but it was his wife's. Now, at the time, his wife was pregnant, so she did not accompany him to Paris. And her doppelganger appeared to him and appeared to be in a very, very somber state. And Don later discovered that at the exact time that this doppelganger appeared to him, his wife gave birth to a stillborn child.
You know what? Maybe, and I don't know why, but this kind of came to me and we were kind of thinking about this and talking about this a little bit, when we were calculating what we wanted to talk about tonight. But, maybe she was astral projecting herself in the unconscious level because of the emotional energy that's attached to that act of giving birth and the emotions you kind of go through, because you go through love and pain. And maybe she had that longing for John, her husband, to probably be there while she was giving birth, just kind of like a thought. But, since people believe that the spirit double is ourself in that sense, you know what I mean? So,
Right.
because he didn't see her in a physical form, he saw her in a spiritual form, right?
Right. And he said that she was in a very, very somber state. And I don't know if she astral projected.
We're not
Uh,
physically attached to our body 100%. You can leave it at any time. There's some who believe that when you go into dream state, it's you leaving your thing. But for those of you who know who's given birth, it's like the most thing, and you go through all these type of emotions, and you're really, you know what I'm saying? So I could probably see in that sense where she could have
well,
mentally
especially,
projected herself there because she was longing for him to be there while she was going through this process, you know.
well, not only that, her child was stillborn. I mean, you can only imagine how she felt, the pain that she was going through, um, because I don't know, I never gave birth, okay? But I'm assuming that when you give birth to a normal baby, that the baby kind of helps push itself through the birth canal. This She was doing all the work on this one. I can only imagine the pain she was in. Maybe she did uh project herself to him. Maybe, it was because of the trauma and the emotions that she was going through.
Oh, and because you know how, I don't know, but you know how like you can people talk about people creating poltergeists and stuff because of their thoughts, because their thoughts are
Yeah.
like energy and you create things. Maybe she was thinking about him and she projected like an image. She may not even projected herself there, but an image of herself or her emotions. So maybe her emotions took on a form and he saw it. Do you know what I mean? Just a thought, and that's could I don't know because there's she wasn't dead, you know,
No.
but he saw her in a see-through sense. So in a way, she could have maybe possibly astral projected herself out when, like somebody was saying, she could have passed out at some point or got
Or maybe it
unconscious
was
or
an
something
out
when
of
she was
body
giving,
experience. I don't know.
or she sent a mental image of herself
Right.
because of her
Right.
emotions.
Well,
But there's more. I mean, that's not the only one, you know.
right. Percy Shelley. He was an English poet, but he was also the husband of Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein, the original author
She
of
was.
Frankenstein. She was.
Yes. I don't. Maybe a
In
lot of people don't know that.
uh, Probably not.
I don't
But
think I do. I
in
may have.
1822, he was on vacation in Italy, and he encountered his doppelganger. Now, it is said that he was dumbfounded and he could only stare at it. And as he stared at this apparition, all it did was point to the Mediterranean Sea. And shortly after this encounter, he drowned in the Mediterranean while sailing a small boat.
You know, I read somewhere that he saw his doppel a few times. Like one time he was standing over his. Well, one time he saw himself. It wasn't him. He saw himself standing over his wife, who was in bed, and his double of himself had his hands over her throat, or about her throat, like not physically on it yet, but like about to choke her, kind of
Yeah.
type of thing. And then there was another time that he saw his doppel, and it was in the daylight, where it actually spoke to him on the terrace. And from what I was reading, it said that this thing asked Percy, or yeah, Percy, that's his name, how long he would be content. Like how long are you really going to be happy living here and doing these things? Because he was always an emotional person in the first place.
Well,
And
I read that him and his wife actually did not get along.
no, well, they really had went downhill because they had lost so many children and so many things. I mean, she was emotionally distraught and just like all over the place because of just losing all her children so much.
Right.
And he was just a freaking depressed person of so many things going on. And I think it even mentioned that he had actually tried to commit suicide at some point
Right.
after having these doppelganger experiences.
Right.
And that's not the only strange thing. I guess after they buried the bodies in the sand because they drowned, whatever,
Right.
like you said, not long after they dug him back up and then they burned him on the beach and kind of gave him like more of a funeral sense with, with the Lord present type of stuff. You know what I mean? But it was
Right.
said that Percy's heart wouldn't burn. So this one guy took it, and then after a while, Mary, his wife, demanded to have his heart. So he gave her Percy's heart, and then she wrapped it up in silk, and then she just kept it in like her writing desk drawer or something until she passed on. And his ashes were eventually buried in this like Protestant cemetery in Rome. So he had actually seen himself, his doppel, in different ways. Like one, it was like see through, in another sense, it was solid.
Right.
And then it was kind of asking like, well, how long do you really think you're going to be happy living here and having this marriage? So in this aspect, it kind of makes you, if you think it's maybe one of those psychological issues, because he had all these issues in the first place.
Well, I read that he was depressed because he was, this guy was a poet, all right, and his wife during the time was a celebrated
Famous.
author.
Yeah, because
She
wrote
was
Frankenstein.
famous for
Yeah.
her time, and it kind of put him in a like a secondary standing, and I imagine that did depress him. But then again, he was happy living in her shadow because even though she was celebrated, that made him an important person too, because back then appearances were very, very
Yeah,
important.
but no
And
man
so
wants.
wasn't social
But
status.
no man wants his woman more.
Well, back then it wasn't as acceptable as it is now.
Well, even now it still kind of gets to some people. Not
Well,
everybody. Okay, so don't come like I'm gonna beat up Raven. But I think in this aspect, as far as him seeing his doppel, I'm wondering if it was more of a psychological sense because whenever he saw his doppel, it was a negative aspect, and maybe he was self-projecting his own anger that he had towards his wife and jealousy. That's why he saw
well,
himself standing over her and choking her to death.
well, not only that though. I mean, didn't he sink further and further into depression every time he saw this thing?
Yes, Percy Shelley. Right. He did. But at some point, okay, he modified that boat and they were having boat races with this other dude, I forgot his name, okay? And he kind of just like the people that he had on his ship with him and stuff like that, he was like he kind of got suicidal cuz he's like we're staying out in the storm and we're just going to go back and it's like he wanted them all to die, which they did. You know what I
Right.
mean? And so this other boat went out to try to go help them, and then he's like, "Nah, go away. I don't need your help," because I think he was purposely killing them all off. But in the sense of that, his doppelganger that he was seeing, to me, I think he was self-projecting his own emotions, and maybe he was creating some type of poltergeist type of thing where it looked like him, but it was his energy, his hatred, his jealousy, his depression, and all that stuff. And that's why it was always like this negative experience when he was having
Right.
his doppel experience. You know what I mean? And then he finally just offed himself. But maybe it wasn't even really physically there, but he thought he was seeing it because maybe he just really, his mind was just so engrossed with these negative emotions, you know?
Right.
So maybe in that sense, he would fit that
Because
mental
from
issue of
yeah,
what you were
because
talking about.
from what I read about them, he was not a happy man. And eventually they eventually ended up leading separate lives,
And
which is why he was off in Italy and she was still in I think it was England, the UK.
yeah. Well, there's that other experience with that lady. She was a teacher or something, right?
Um, yeah, Emily Saggy,
Or is it
Sagee,
Sage? Is it Sage or
Sage,
Sage?
Saggy, whatever.
Sounds like
She
it'd be
was a
Sage or
young
something.
French teacher, and she was in this in a village called Latvia.
Sorry, I
Um,
coughed over you. I apologize.
that's all right. In 1846 and 1847, most of her students would often witness Sage's twin appear and disappear in full view. Now, the twin would often mimic this teacher's movements, and it would also be active at times when Emily was motionless and it appeared to be healthy when she was known to be ill. Now, one day in the middle of class, while she was writing on the blackboard, her doppelganger appeared beside her and precisely copied every one of her movements, except that, like it was writing on the chalkboard, except it
Well, it
didn't
didn't
have,
physically write on the chalk, but
it wasn't, it had no chalk. And this was witnessed by 13 students. And not all students all the time saw this doppelganger. Just some of the students did. But there was this one time when all the students saw her working in the school's garden at the same time that they could see her sitting in a chair in the same room that they were in. So two of the more brave and curious students tried to interact with this image in the chair,
mm-hmm.
but they reported that it did not interact with them and they could feel this odd resistance in the air surrounding it.
Like it was had like a force field, in a
Right.
sense.
Kind of like a force field around it.
Hmm.
Now, what makes this case so unique is the fact that Miss Sage never saw her own doppelganger, while other people could. But she did report that she did report about feeling tired and fatigued when people reported seeing this thing around her. But
But
these
wait, okay, just give me a second here. to formulate everything that you were just saying it, because there's a lot of what everybody's kind of seeing with the students and teachers and everybody else. They were all seeing her, and yet she never saw it, but it was always like right next to her, mimicking exactly what she was doing. So if she was hopping on one foot, it was hopping on one foot. If she was, you know, whatever, writing on the board or doing whatever, sitting outside, gardening and just whatever, it was doing everything verbatim of what she does. It almost sounds like she left her body, but she was still there. You know what I mean? So she was she was still physically controlling her body, but she was out of her body at the same time, and maybe that's why she was fatigued and tired.
Either that or this thing was draining her
energy.
Oh,
like a spirit. Yeah, in the spirit sense, if it was a spirit and it was like just using her. Yeah.
But this woman, I mean, this went on for like actually over a year. And the students and some of the faculty, of course, I'm sure back then they had other teachers and whatever of the school, were seeing this thing, but she never, ever saw it.
Right.
She only took other people's word for it that this thing was following her around.
Yeah, but there was so many people reporting that it was happening.
Right.
So what, everybody's a nutter except for her? You know, so obviously it happened. But what it was, I mean, nobody really knows. Some probably, like we gave 2 examples. Maybe she was, you know, really partly left her body, you know what I mean? But was still physically in control of it because she was so close to it at all times. And then again, you said maybe it's some type of entity that was feeding off of her the whole time. What do they call those things that feed off of you the whole time? Not vampires, suckers, or whatever. Not all that
energy kind of vampire.
Yeah, I'm not talking about just that, but isn't there another thing out there that kind of just leeches onto you?
I'm not sure what it's called. It's on the tip of my tongue, and I can't.
Yeah, and I can't think. Well, maybe somebody in chat might know it and just like shoot it out for us, and then we'll throw it out. But you know, that's just like what? That's just a couple of different documented cases so far. You know,
right? These are just a few known cases, but I'm sure that if you looked, you would find
maybe it could be
succubus, maybe. Yeah. But I'm sure that if you looked, that you could find more, many more on the internet. What I found interesting about this teacher, though, was this is why I think that maybe it was draining her energy, because she would just sit, sometimes from what I was reading, she would just sit sometimes like she was tired, and this thing would be around her and it'd be very active, or it would, be very, very healthy while she was ill. So that's why I kind of thought that maybe, I don't know if this was actually a doppelganger or if it was just something attached to her draining her energy. Which it could have been the doppelganger doing that.
That does kind of make sense, but this one case alone in that aspect, it is interesting. Like I said, it could have been her unconsciously projecting herself, but she never went too far off. But then again, and I could see why it being her constantly being tired of it, because she was always in that state of doing it. You know what I mean? But then again, what you're saying to me, I find very interesting too. But you're just saying there's some of this. There was this incident, that I had read online where someone was actually wrong, and this is what I was talking about before, where they were actually wrongfully convicted by mistaken identity, and his name was Adolf Beck, and it was his incident, what happened to him, that led the English to create the Court of Criminal Appeal in 1907.
Right. Adolf Beck was an educated chemist who had engaged in various financial endeavors and had traveled to different countries during the from 1870s to the 1880s.
Right.
And
a little, hold on, so I gotta slow my back. Sorry. I almost had to get up for a second and had to leave. I thought my back was cramping. I was like, oh my God, sorry, I gotta go. My back. I'm sorry. My back's cramping right now. Go ahead.
That's okay. But like I said, he traveled to different countries during the 1870s and the 1880s. Well, after moving back from South America to England in 1885, he resided at the Convent Garden Hotel. Anyways, to speed up the story a bit, which is never going to happen, on December 16th in 1895, he stepped out the door on Victoria Street where a woman abruptly blocked his movement and began to accuse him of tricking her out of her jewelry and watches. Now, Beck was confused and he brushed the woman aside and he began to cross the road, but this woman began to chase after him. So Beck had spotted a police officer, and he complained to the police officer that a crazy prostitute was chasing him and had accosted him.
Could you imagine that, Dave?
I know he didn't know who this woman was. You know.
Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry about my back. It just you know how all of a sudden you just get that real, and I was just like, I came out. I couldn't stop my reaction because it was like almost like a Charlie type spasm. Like, oh my gosh, but what? He just stepping out of the building, minding all his business. This woman comes up, like, just screaming at him in his face, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm out of here." You know what I mean?
Right.
And then he's telling
us. He reported her to a police officer as a crazy prostitute that wouldn't leave him alone. But
because that's probably what he thought she was.
It probably was. Well, the woman caught up, and she began demanding that Beck be arrested for swindling her earlier in the weeks before. So the officer took both of them to the station where the woman identified herself as Ottilie Messonnier.
Mm-hmm.
And she was single, and she was a language teacher. Well, she claimed that Beck approached her, tipping his hat and asking her if she was Lady Everton. Mm-hmm. And after she explained that she wasn't, they began to strike up this friendly conversation. And according to her, Beck said that he was Lord Willoughby. Now,
that's what she says.
That's what she said.
I sound like when I say that, I sounded like crazy there. Sorry, guys. But this is what, according to her, excuse me.
Yeah, according to her, she said that Beck said that he was Lord Willoughby and that he had invited her to go to the French Riviera on his yacht. Yeah, right. Like, somebody's going to go right when they first meet somebody.
Some people do. Some people do, okay?
Maybe she was a prostitute. I don't know.
Hey, no, she wasn't. She was a single language teacher of class.
Language teacher thinking that she hooked up with a rich guy. Okay. So she was going to go on the French Riviera. But anyway, he explained to her that he would purchase her wardrobe for the voyage. And he made up this check. He made up this list and wrote her a check for £40 to help cover the cost. And at the same time, she claimed that Beck noticed her watch and her rings and asked her to let him have them so that he could match their sizes and replace them with more valuable pieces. Well, after the man left, she discovered that a second watch was missing. And she became suspicious, so she raced to the bank to try to cash this check, and she found out it was worthless and that she was tricked.
Mm-hmm.
And that Adolf Beck was the man who had did it, and after her claims, Beck was arrested.
Done it, yeah. You know, during that time, there was this inspector who was in charge of Beck's case, and when he was going through all these files and stuff, he actually discovered that there was over 22 women who had been defrauded by a gray-haired gentleman who called himself Lord Wilton D. What did you say that name was? Willoughby? Yeah. So he had found even more, 22 more other cases of this. Well, of course, the inspector tracked down the women, and he asked them to view a lineup that included Beck. And basically, what was Beck and 10 other men who were just randomly picked off the street. But
well, that's the way they did it back then.
Right, but Beck, unfortunately, he was the only one who had gray hair and a mustache. So of course they're gonna.
That wasn't conspicuous.
Yeah, so of course they quickly pointed out that by every single woman, they said yes, Adolf Beck is the man that defrauded them, as well. So not long after, Beck was charged with over 10 misdemeanors, you know what I'm trying to say, misdemeanors, and 4 felonies.
Well, excuse me. The felony charges were based, though, on presumed prior convictions in 1877 when a man named John Smith had been sentenced to 5 years for swindling unattached women by using the name Lord Willoughby and by writing worthless checks and taking their jewelry. Now, the Smith guy, I guess, he had disappeared after his release, and it was assumed that Beck and Smith were one and the same because of the same MO and the name Lord Willoughby. But I don't know, for whatever reason, they never decided to check the inmate previous records, that the descriptions of John Smith from prison, from the prison files, were never compared with the current appearance of Adolf Beck.
You know, it was during Beck's hearing, and it was like, what, 1895, one of the police officers that arrested Smith 18 years before was called to testify during those trials, and he stated that in May of 1877, Beck was indeed the Smith guy, and there was no doubt whatever in his mind that he was that same man. Well, of course, Adolf Beck is going to protest against this because he said that he can produce witnesses that he was actually in South America, and he could prove that he was living in South America in 1877 when all those other crimes occurred that this Smith guy did.
Right. And on March 5th of 1896...
I should say this, wait, in the picture, I didn't tell you guys this, but in the picture, Adolf Beck is the guy above, and the other guy below is his doppel. That he was, the guy in the bottom half of the picture, that was his photos, and he was the one who actually committed all these crimes, and Adolf Beck is the guy above who was wrongfully accused by 20-some chicks. That he did
22.
22, yeah.
On March 5th in 1896, Adolf Beck was found guilty of fraud, and he was sentenced to 7 years of penal servitude at Portland Convict Prison, and he was given the name John Smith's old prison number.
Well, yeah, he was given his old uniform and the
he was
number.
given his old uniform, his so-called old uniform, and his old prison number. I think it was like D523, something like that. With the letter W, which indicated that he was a repeat convict. Now, during that time, a petition for re-examination for the Beck case was requested to see the prison's description of John Smith, but were denied.
Every single time they were denied.
Yeah, every single time this request was denied. But in 1898, an official at the Home Office looked at the Smith file and saw that Smith was Jewish and had been circumcised. Okay. And while Beck was not circumcised, but he was still thought to be guilty of the other crimes, so they only removed the W from his numbers.
Right then and there, should have told you, this isn't the same man, because you can't be circumcised and then all of a sudden not. And I'm keeping it polite, okay? But
I know, because I'm wondering why they looked.
No, because they take documents to prove, okay, physical features and stuff. They didn't have the type of procedures that we do now, okay? So they always wrote down physical features of the inmates or people that came in and went around, because that's how they did it back then. That's what they did. And because of cases like this, and another one that we're going to bring up after this, is when things started to change. But there was this journalist who knew Beck, and he wrote an article basically saying that Beck had been tried on the assumption that he was Smith, and that there was no evidence to support such assumption. And at some point, over 8 years, basically, the public opinion started to sway, but eventually Beck was paroled in July of 1901 only because he had good behavior. But check this out. He got arrested again not long after that when he was out, because another woman, her name was Paulina Scott, she filed a complaint that, again, a gray-haired gentleman accosted her on the street and stole her jewelry as well.
What did they do? Did they think that Beck was the only gray-haired man in the UK?
Well, look at the picture.
Yeah, I know. But the inspector who took the complaint was familiar with the Beck case and assumed he was the guilty man. So he sent Scott to the restaurant where Beck took his lunch. She didn't recognize him. But the inspector was convinced it was him and set a trap for him. So on April of 1904, as Beck left his flat, Scott ran up to him and accused him of defrauding her of her jewelry. And Beck, of course, was shocked and denied the charge, but Scott kept accusing him over and over. Beck panicked and ran away, but he was immediately caught by the officers waiting to arrest him. Well, you know what? I would have ran too, just to get away from the guy. So he was placed in jail again, and on June 27th,
he was placed in jail again
he was placed in jail again on June 27th, and while he was waiting trial, the trial was like 10 days later on July 7th. Well, this Inspector Kane...
Well, during that... No, he was in jail for like 10 days. You know,
right.
He was waiting trial, sitting in jail, and he got arrested again on the date that was documented was like on June 27th. And while he was sitting in jail, not even 10 days later, that inspector discovered something.
Oh, you're right. You're right. I kind of got mixed up there.
It's okay. You're kind of just... Because we have a lot of what we're trying to throw out tonight.
Yeah, but I know. Well, this Inspector Kane... he was told of the arrest of a man who had tried to swindle some rings from a pair of, I think they were unemployed actresses, something like that afternoon, and he was apprehended at a pawn shop. Well, being familiar with the Beck case, and since he was at both of Beck's trials, asked for details.
Right.
And it turns out that the details did fit the pattern. But Adolf Beck was already in jail awaiting sentencing.
Right.
So when the inspector went to the jail cell, he said he
saw.
Oh, yeah, he saw Beck in there.
No, he saw the other guy.
Or the other guy, sorry. He saw the other guy with gray hair, the same height, and really very similar features to that of Beck's.
Right.
But Beck was younger, and he weighed less.
Which you can see in his pictures, yeah.
Yeah. And this other man had a scar on the right side of his neck, just like that, what's her name? Ottilie Messonnier recalled.
Yeah, the first crazy school teacher, yeah.
Right, the crazy school teacher. But this other man gave his name as William Thomas, but this inspector was convinced that he was John Smith and informed Scotland Yard. Now, 3 of the 5 women that convicted Beck were brought back to look at this other man, and they quickly identified him as the swindler.
Right. So they switched over, like, oh, wait, that's not him. It's
they changed
this guy.
Their story, you know. So soon, many of the women admitted their error in blaming Beck, and it turns out that William Thomas was also the alias of John Smith.
Right.
I think William Weiss, but his real name turned out to be Wilhelm Meyer. Now, when Beck was sentenced for his crimes, Wilhelm had gone back to the United States, and he didn't return until 1903 because he thought that Beck had served out Wilhelm's time, so he went back to swindling until he was arrested. And he was finally brought to trial on September 15th, and he pled guilty to all the offenses. But this Wilhelm Meyer, he was in England when all of this happened. He knew that Adolf Beck was being blamed for crimes that he did. So he waits until this guy is sentenced, and he goes back to America. And when he thinks the coast is clear and everybody's forgotten about him, here he goes back to England.
Well, Adolf Beck, you know, you can see these pictures. Adolf Beck's above, the other guy, Wilhelm's below. They are very similar, but yet there's slight differences. And so I can see why people would think he was the one that accosted him. But unfortunately, he was imprisoned for several years due to his doppel, Wilhelm. And I think Adolf Beck eventually was given a free pardon by the king, and I think that's like on July 29th of 1904 or something like that. And he was, and in compensation for his false imprisonment, you know.
Oh yeah, he was awarded £5,000
I know. Could you
for
imagine?
serving several years in prison. All he
8.
got was 5,000, or okay, 7, 8 years. All he got was £5,000.
Could you imagine that happening to you? You know, just
Yeah.
one day you're minding your own business and some crazy wild person in your mind comes rushing up and accusing you of things that you never even did, and then being arrested and put in prison for like 8 years.
I know. I just
And
when I
he's
got out,
sitting
I
here.
had to get revenge.
He's
That's pretty
constantly
stupid.
telling them, I wasn't even here. There's people who can
Right.
prove I was overseas in South America at these times, because he had traveled and had many financial endeavors that he did, from owning mines to
But they didn't care
boats and
because
this.
this so-called inspector was convinced that he was the one that did it. And the thing of it was,
Well,
they did this lineup, and he's the only one there with gray hair and a mustache.
but he does look very similar to the other man.
He
But
does.
but check this out. The other thing is when they finally decided to check the records of the physical features, because that's what they do. They write down any type of physical feature. Like if you have a tattoo, they write down the tattoo. And
Right.
clearly this guy one was circumcised, one wasn't circumcised. When they found out that one was and one wasn't, they should have known this was not the man. But they decided, okay, so you weren't guilty of maybe this newer crimes, but we're just going to blame you for all of Smith's crimes, so you're going to keep staying in jail. You know? And it's just,
And
this
what did
guy
they
had
do?
no... And then when he finally gets out because of good behavior, then some other because this douchebag comes back and starts committing crimes again, and then they're like, let's go after Adolf Beck again. If I was Beck, I'd probably have almost practically lost my mind. I don't really know what happened to him
would've
after
sued.
that. Who are you going to sue? It doesn't work back then like that. You know what I'm saying? This
No,
is
it
like
didn't.
the 1900s. The king is like, oh, sorry, we'll just give you a free pardon.
Sorry.
Whoopee.
Here's £5,000. Sorry
Go-
about that. Here's your pardon.
Go have a
Good
nice
luck.
life. Yeah,
Have a
see
good
ya.
life. You know, I mean, come on.
Did you know that, and I know a couple of people know this, but like in the 1900s there was another incident that occurred with the doppelgangers that actually changed the way the prison and the police system worked in a way, and that this two incarcerations is what inspired the practicing of fingerprinting.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Okay. Well, some people. Let me switch the picture here real quick, because we got some of the pictures for that one too. But this case was in Kansas, and it was in like 1903. And there was this man named Will West. Well, he arrived at Leavenworth Penitentiary to serve the time for I don't remember what the heck he did. Okay, but anyways, he was there because he did something. Well, while Will was standing in front of the prison clerk kind of gave him this puzzled look and told him that, he'd seen him before. Well, of course, Will's like, I've never even been here to Leavenworth or any penitentiary before, and you're just mistaken, right? Well, the clerk's like, no, I know you, I've seen you, so he started digging, and he's like, I know you, I've taken your measurements before, you've been here before. And of course, Will West is perturbed, saying, I've never been here before. And the clerk's like, well, I'm the one who processed and took down all your identifications to become a prisoner and stuff.
Well, it was called the B-E-R,
Bert.
Bertillon method.
Mm-hmm.
It was named after,
Alfonso.
Alphonse Bertillon. It was
Alfonso
a method.
Bertillon.
It was a method used by taking measurements of the size and shape of different physical features and face.
Yeah, that's what they practiced for a long time, and that's why
Did.
That's why poor Adolf Beck was screwed basically before. But this clerk, he started to, because he's like, I know it's you, and Will's like, nah. And so the clerk turned around and started digging through his files of archived inmates, and he located the file of the prisoner who was convicted of murder 2 years earlier. Well, the photo of the man was identical to that of Will West in every physical feature. Well, the thing is that Will West who was standing in front of the clerk at the time, he was actually being honest. He never ever been to Leavenworth. And of course he's really mad because he's like, how did his photo get into the system? How do they know about, why is his photo there? Why do they have the documentation? Because he's never been there. He's never committed any crime until just now that got him in there. And the strange thing is that both Will and the man had the same name. One was named William West, and the other guy was named Will West. And they were basically identical in almost every single way. I mean, both men were not related, and they've never crossed paths until that day that Will found out that he had a doppel in the same penitentiary.
Well, this is what I don't understand about this, okay? If the William Smith was convicted of murder 2 years earlier, wouldn't he have still been in prison?
Well, yeah.
Why would he be coming back to prison, But it was said that because of this incident that they learned that the Bertillon method would no longer be fully effective.
Mm-hmm.
So they decided to use the method of fingerprinting that was already being used in Scotland. And it was first started in 1850s in India when a Sir W.J. Herschel, I'm trying to remember this off the top of my head, he was a chief magistrate, had asked locals to stamp their business contracts with their palms.
Well, right. Because he actually started the whole, if you want to call it fingerprinting, finger palming technique, because you don't always have photos and people's images change as they age. But you're, like I said earlier, although you may have, and like Adolf Beck, if they would have had fingerprinting back then, they would have let him go. Because your fingerprint is unique. Even dogs have their nose. It's like your fingerprint, right? The dog's nose has its own pattern, and you can, if you lose your dog. Okay, you know how kids and when they're younger, you have get their little hands printed on stuff, so you have like their little imprints in case they go missing. They're also doing that nowadays, where people can have their pets' noses inked, and then they have that proof. So if somebody ever steals your dog and says, that's my dog, and they're like, no, that's my dog, and then you got it, because every animal, just like a human, has their own unique print, and it's on their nose.
Why are they doing that? I thought they microchipped.
They do that too, but sometimes some people don't get microchipped. They also go to the length of having because like I said, the nose pattern has its own unique pattern, like we do with our fingers. Pattern, you know what I'm saying? Pattern, print, whatever. You know what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean? So this guy, he technically invented it, even though he didn't know it. But it's because of him doing that, brought forth, and they started to, discover that, hey, everybody has their own unique print,
Right. Exactly. But where did the belief in doppelgangers or spirit doubles come from? I mean, is it true that everyone has an exact double somewhere? And is there any truth in them, and do they really exist?
They're, from what we're saying and stuff, I mean, because you look at this guy's photos, both those guys with their details, they're like the same height, same weight, same physical features, both Adolf Beck and, the West brothers and stuff. I mean, one guy's clearly walk around. There's people that kind of look like it. There's different. I mean, they believe in the existence of the double self. I mean, you have those people who believe in, like what we said before, the whole parallel life universe, and that sometimes either we or they cross over through some unseen portal for like a very short amount of time,
Yeah, but you have those who don't believe they exist at all, that they're only hallucinations resulting from excessive illegal drug use. And then you have the scientist who believes that this phenomenon happened based on injuries or stimulation to certain areas of the brain or from mental illness.
Yeah, but, I mean, no one really knows for sure for how back this belief goes, because it's been around literally for thousands of years. I mean, I think since humans started talking, really they've had these spiritual experiences of a spirit showing itself as you, and also people having somebody roaming around that's physically like you. And the funny thing is if you kind of, think about it, because when you look at those pictures of the West brothers, even though they're not technically brothers,
Right.
related, and then you look at Adolf Beck and that Wilhelm, that kind of goes with what I was talking about, the whole genetic code and the DNA lineage and maybe having similar heritage about, some of them being similar Irish and English background mixed together, where you can, at one point, you'll eventually come up where you guys are going to have almost the most exact, identical coding, but yet there's just a very slight difference. And none of them knew each other.
Right.
Both of those cases. And I'm sure there's other cases like this out there that we just didn't discover, or that's had happened to other people,
Well, I know that even today there are cases of mistaken identity, and there have been people accused of crimes or whatever that didn't really commit them because of mistaken identity. So there must be some truth to it. And like I said, I'm not really sure if I believe in them or not. But I have to say, though, that I do wonder that if a parallel universe does exist,
right?
and let's say let's just say for argument's sake that it does exist.
It may.
And yeah, it may. And we all have a double there.
Mm-hmm.
When our double dies, do we die? Or when we die, does our double die? I'm thinking really that we may never know for sure.
Just kind of a lot of the things that we're talking about, and the fact that we've had people share their experiences of saying that they know their friends are calling them up, their relatives are calling up and saying, why were you here? Why didn't you turn around and come back to me when I was yelling for you? You just gave me this dirty look and took off. What's your problem? Or, from the one case of our friend who she was in the house and her husband was up in the shower and she's downstairs and she sees him go walking for the phone in a physical form. They're the twins, they were on, and they saw the doppel of their father, and then they saw the astral projection of themselves, and then there was another one where they saw themselves. You know what I mean? So
right.
What are all these things? I mean, there's so many theories to why people are, and even me, I had people tell me they saw me in different states, and I'm like, I've never been there, or the fact that I got accused of sleeping around with someone's boyfriend in a town that it was the very first time. I never did stop in that town again, you know what I mean, and eat at their fast food restaurant or anything. But it's just like I got accused of sleeping with someone's boyfriend.
Well, I did have an incident one time where I was in the grocery store and this guy I knew came up to me and he asked me, says, "Are you too good to speak?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "I just saw you in Walmart and I said hello to you and you just walked right on by me. Didn't even look at me." I don't go to Walmart.
Yes, you do.
Unless I absolutely have to.
Yeah.
I don't like crowds for one thing, but
well, you don't like the circus either.
Yeah, but Walmart is a place that I avoid every chance I get.
Yeah, unless you really have to go.
Oh, if I really, really have to go in there, then I go in, get what I want or what I'm sent in there for, and get out just as soon as I can. I don't go in there and look around. I don't even know what Walmart sells hardly.
You know what I picture you? Because this is how much you hate going there. If they had big enough doors, I think you would physically drive your car through the aisle, grab what you needed, go up to the checkout, whip your change, and keep driving your car through. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
That's how much you hate.
Exactly. And I don't like waiting in line either. I always go to the self-checkout.
You make your own drive-through of Walmart. I could
right.
see you doing it.
If I could, I would just drive through the doors, go
right down to the aisle you needed it, reach out your window and peel
go
out.
in the back seat and go pay for it and get
peel
the heck
out
of there.
Exactly. I just drive through Walmart. That's exactly how
Walmart.
I see it. But the thing is, I mean, there's so many theories of people experiencing this, right? It's either in physical form or spiritual body, like what we're talking about, but there's just all these random theories we've kind of tossed out tonight. I mean, could it be possible that doppelganger in the physical form it's seen by people in the past and the physical body could just, like I was saying, is the weird DNA genetic similar lineage at some point. So You know what? Because there's people who, there's websites up right now where it's like, help me find my doppel. And it's so easy now because you have Google drop image in search, and then it will hit all these different matches of somebody who comes close to you. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
actually, technically today, there's a lot of people who are finding people who look just vaguely similar. I mean, practically every little part of them, but there's a little bit difference. And I was seeing this website, and there's a lot of people that are on there where they actually found their doppel, and they look the same hair color, the same shape, the smile, everything almost is to a T. You could almost think they were twins, but they never met each other. And and now it's more easier to find your doppel because of the technology that we have. I mean, you guys just go drop your image in, and you might find somebody who hits your match. You know, it's a lot easier to find that when it comes to the fact of the genetic coding and the heritage and the lineage stuff kind of matching up at some point. It's going to happen because I think they said that there's only so many facial different pattern type features. I forgot what the number was, you know what I mean, but it's been talked about. There's like only so many variations of it, so you're bound to hit on somebody who has one or two, if not a lot more, just because of that. But you know, I don't know. I mean, that's one thing I'm thinking as far as people probably meeting the more physical sense. But then there's people who see the doppel that's a physical form, and then all of a sudden they just disappear. There's people who also say that they see the doppel and it's the clones, and it could be like the black-eyed beings. You know what I mean? As far as the adult form, because remember I saw that person who looked vaguely similar to my friend who had already passed over.
Right.
You know, so maybe maybe these black-eyed beings are clones of people who are already here too. You know, so there's so many things that are out there. We just don't know. We couldn't present you just with one thing and say this is what it is, because really there's a variation of why people are having these experiences, you know, from demonic to spirit tricksters to astral projecting yourself, as they talk as a vardoger or whatever you're saying, the ancient Egypt mythology of the Ka, but that to me is that's just your soul, you know what I mean, from what they're saying. And then you had, what was the other stuff that we had said? I forgot.
Forgot.
But there's so many out there, and it's presented in all, the parallel universe.
Parallel universe, there you go.
But I do want to look more into that stuff, because me and you are going to have more stuff when it comes to that, and dimensional stuff, and more Bigfoot shit stuff. Sorry, guys. I slipped up and swore. I apologize.
Yep, you sure did.
I said ship. S-H-I-P. That's what I was talking about.
But it's like I said, I don't know if I believe in doppelgangers or not, okay?
Well,
but one thing that I absolutely do not believe is that they are clones. I just don't believe that clone theory, because for it to be a clone...
Oh, you mean like the super soldier clone thingy majiggy?
Right.
Yeah.
For it to be, for me to have a doppelganger out there that was cloned, how did they get my DNA? You know, did they sneak in here while I was asleep?
No, you leave your DNA everywhere you go. So if you go to Burger King or something else...
Well, then that means that somebody has to be following me to get it.
Yeah, I am. I'm cloning you all over the place, because I need little minions to do my work.
Yeah, well, this month we're going to clone Spooky, so who's going to follow her around to get her DNA?
No, but I see what you're saying with that aspect in that sense. No, I agree. But that's conspiratists' theories. But as far as, the similar genetic coding, very possible. As far as spiritual sense, a trickster who takes on the form of you, I believe that can happen. You know what I mean? As far as somebody astral projecting themselves out of their body to somewhere else while they're sleeping or unconscious or, whatever. It happens. You know what I mean?
I don't know if I buy the thing if astral projection or doppelgangers are the same thing.
But I think people might think they're seeing a doppel when somebody might just be traveling in their spiritual sense, in their spiritual form, and not in their physical form. And maybe when they saw you kind of just roaming around, they might like, oh my gosh, it's a doppel. You see what I mean? It's like mistaken terminology. That's what I'm trying to say. Because there's many cases out there that say this is a doppel, but to me it fits more of this or that or what. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm trying to say. And I understand, I agree with what you're saying in that aspect, totally. You know? We can't tell you guys for sure what it is, but I believe that things do mimic people. That's been known for a lot of times. Because I've had times where I've heard, like, family members' voices, and they weren't even in the house. You know what I mean? So why can't...
Yeah, I've experienced that, too.
So why can't these things take on forms of people that we know? You know, it could very well be. But I've never seen... I don't know what I would do if I saw myself. I'd probably buy myself a burger. Yeah, I don't know.
I really can't say what I would do if I saw myself.
Mm-hmm.
I really can't say what I would do. But I don't know. I just don't ever expect to ever meet myself anywhere.
I don't know.
And I don't think the world could stand two of me.
I know I have a hard time handling you for 2 hours. So
my family can't stand one of me. Can't handle one of me.
I don't know.
That's what I would do if I ever met my doppelganger. I would invite them over just to annoy my family and people that I didn't like.
But they say that your doppel is like the opposite version of you. So are you the bad one or the good one?
Well, it depends on my mood.
I suppose. I don't know. I just find this thing interesting. And the fact that there's so many people who are having these occurrences, and it's not just like one or two. It's like tons of people.
Well, there has to be something to it, and I will admit that.
It's occurring. It's happening.
Because there are documented cases of something happening.
But look at the two photos we showed tonight. One guy who was accused wrongly of crimes that he never did, Adolf Beck, and he had a doppel. You have the two West brothers, and they were never even knew each other. And then you have, like I tell you, you go on the internet and you type in, I think, help me find my doppel, some type of website like that, and there's tons of people who've already found people who look just like them. You know, so there are people out there that look like us, you know, but is it a paranormal, as far as that part goes, is it paranormal? No. But are there paranormal spirits doubles?
My doppelganger is probably Kathy Bates.
Not Kathy Bates. Kathy, the other one.
I was told I sounded like Kathy Bates.
No, not Kathy Bates. It's the other one. It's the one that was in Jules.
Kathleen Turner?
Kathleen Turner. You sound more like Kathleen Turner. And it makes me think of that one movie clip, War of Roses, where she's like, I'm going to knock you out or something, and she pops him in the face.
Yeah.
That part where...
I seriously doubt, though, if Kathleen Turner... I sound terrible over electronic stuff. I really do. And even over the phone. And I seriously doubt if Kathleen Turner has ever answered the phone and someone said, hello, sir, how are you doing today?
They did. She has been told that. But, you know, Kathy Bates, she's kind of got a raspy voice too, though. But I think it's because she had, like, some type of lymph node issue too, whatever. But, I mean, I don't know. We can't tell you for sure what these experiences that each of you guys have experienced, or what, you know, like I said, somebody claims they're seeing me in different states, and there's no way I could be there. It's like, you know, 3,000 miles away. I can't be there and then back here at the same time. So, I mean, it is happening. It is occurring. But what each experience is, I think it kind of varies depending on that experience of what they're happening. I think some of it's paranormal. I think some of it is actually somebody who has similar features to you, too. You know?
Yeah.
I believe in both of those.
Just for the record, Noreen is saying, no, Kathy Bates.
Yeah, I know.
Kathy Bates.
Well, somebody thinks I sound like some other actress. I forgot her name. It was like Kendrick something. Some chick named Kendrick. I mean, somebody else in here who watches our show thinks I sound like some singer/actress as well. So, but I just want to say thanks to everybody who came in, and thank you for those who kind of were sharing some of their doppelganger experiences in chat, as well as just kind of telling us randomly on social networks before we even had the show. I thought it was really interesting, all the people who were kind of just like, oh my gosh, my family member saw this, or I saw this, or, you know, so it's out there, it's happening. But I think there's just a little variation to each person of what they're experiencing, you know. That's just my belief. And like I said, if you got everybody in the same room, like everybody who inhabited the planet, and we got them all in one room, and they all told the experiences that that they had happen, it would change the reality of how we know it. You know,
Now, I have had a feeling of deja vu more than once. You
oh,
know.
Anna Kendrick. Yes, Millie thinks I sound like Anna Kendrick. That's what it was. But
So.
you deja vu experience, well, yeah, like where you felt like you've been. But there's moments where you feel like you've known somebody before too. But that's more of like the reincarnation thing. So there's some people who see like pictures of people who've already passed on that they look similar to, and they're like, oh, that's you in your past life, you know. But I don't know. But well, why don't you tell people what we're gonna do for our next show?
I want to thank our mods for doing a good job for us. They always do. I want to thank everyone who came in to listen to us and who is listening on Ustream. And thank you, Raven, for a good show tonight. Join us next week, June 16th at 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, when our topic will be the strange disappearance of R.C. Dunbar. I hope everyone has a good night. Share us on Facebook or any other social media you happen to be a member of.
And I want to thank everybody for the people who help share our shows weekly with us, sharing it on their social networks.
That's right.
I want to say thank you guys. And
Richard, Penny,
well, there's a ton
Angel,
of other people. There's a ton of other people who do it, and I just want to say thanks to you guys, you know, tuning in, because we're not experts. We're just two friends sharing stuff, and we appreciate getting comments and messages from you guys, you know, sharing your thoughts on these topics and giving us topics as well. And as far as the R.C. Dunbar missing child case that we're going to talk about, it was actually really, it was so huge about it, and there's so much to it, from, you know, mistaken identity to kidnapping charges to murder to all this stuff. It's like one huge bundle of just like, it's such an intense story, and it made national news all over the whole states, and it's been going on for so long. And when I stumbled on this, I'm like, we have to talk about this. So I can't wait next week to, you know, talk about that show for sure. But I just want to say thanks, and I'll see you guys next week, and everybody take care and be careful. And
everybody
share us on YouTube.
Everybody have a
with
great
friends.
week, and thank you for coming.
And
Good night, everyone.
And subscribe to us on YouTube. So good night.